Hi everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. I'm so happy to have you here today. So today you are going to learn about how to discover satisfaction with your eating. So in other words, you're going to learn how to use mindful eating so that you can have your cake and eat it too. My name is Susan Watson. I'm a registered dietitian, a certified intuitive eating counselor, the owner of A Little Nutrition, which is a nutrition counseling company, and I help people learn how to take the confusion out of their eating and positively nourish their body. So I hope that all sounds good. So today we're going to cover a lot. We're going to dive into the difference between mindful eating and mindless eating. We're going to take a look at why it's so important to listen inwardly to what your body is needing and wanting, and the importance of using mindful eating to navigate how to nourish your body. And finally, we're going to put this all into practice by going through a few different ways that we can implement mindful eating every day. So again, I hope this sounds great, and I'm looking forward to getting into all of this. If you have any questions, make sure to pop it into the chat off to the side, or you can, at the end of the presentation, email me at susan@alittle.nutrition.com. Before we get started, I just wanted to put out a quick disclaimer that the information in this webinar is not meant to diagnose or to be personalized medical recommendations. The material provided in this webinar is intended to be used for educational and informational purposes only. The information provided here today is not intended as, nor should be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, suggestions, diagnosing, counseling, or treatment of any kind. So now that's out of the way, let's get into it. So, like most of us, you've probably eaten something in the past few hours. And like many of us, you may not be able to recall everything that you ate, let alone the sensation of eating it and, what it felt. So most folks spend about 2.5 hours a day eating, but more than half the time we're doing something else too. We've got other things on the go. We might be working or driving or reading, maybe watching TV, fiddling with electronic device, and we're not fully aware of what we're actually eating. And this mindless eating, or maybe a lack of awareness of the food that we're consuming, isn't very helpful for our health. So do you remember your last meal? Do you remember what you ate yesterday? What it tasted like, what it was, what it smelled like? Were there any flavors that stood out to you? So yeah, I know, probably not, and that's okay. And we're going to talk about why we do this and what we can do about it. Ultimately, food. It's one of life's greatest pleasures, and many of us have a really conflicted relationship with it, and we miss out on some of the most basic things like satisfaction. But it is possible, and not really all that difficult, to reclaim the joy of eating, and that's why I'm so excited to do this presentation today with you. So let's start off by taking a look at what mindful eating actually is. So mindful eating is a powerful tool to regain control of your eating. This ancient practice can transform the way you think about food and sets the stage for a lifetime of healthy eating. To define mindful eating, first we need to take a look at what mindfulness in itself means. So mindfulness means focusing on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting your feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations without judgment, and that is the key. So the tenets of mindfulness apply to mindful eating as well, but the concept of mindful eating goes well beyond the individual. It also encompasses things like how what you eat affects the world. Maybe things that we don't always consider or think about, like sustainability of the food crops, as well as the health benefits of the food and what it's doing in our body and how it makes us feel. So mindful eating, again, is an ancient mindfulness practice with profound modern implications and applications for resolving this troubled love-hate relationship that in our modern society we tend to have with food. Mindful eating brings mindfulness to food choices and the experience of eating. And mindful eating helps us become aware of our thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations related to eating. And it helps us reconnect with our inner innate wisdom about hunger and fullness, which I'm going to talk a lot more when we get into this, but often we're not even able to recognize hunger and fullness and what that means in our bodies. So I look forward to talking about that soon. So let's take a look at what mindless eating is. So with a lot of, our focus, today is going to be on mindful eating. A lot of us, we don't realize that we continue to be mindless when it comes to our eating. Of course of course it's hard to be mindful in our society, in our life, given our hectic lives and busy schedules. But if any of the following sounds like you, then maybe it's time to start thinking about how to bring mindfulness into your eating. So if this sounds familiar, maybe only leaving 10 minutes to eat lunch when you're at work or during the day, or maybe dashboard dining, in other words, eating in the car while driving. How about eating a quick dinner before heading out to run to an activity or an event that you have lined up? Ignoring those hunger signals and working through the lunch hour just because you got to get things done and don't even recognize that lunch is over. Eating maybe while on a mobile device or on your phone. Or how about eating in front of the TV and not really knowing what's going on because you're really watching your show? So mindless eating often causes us to eat too quickly and typically overeat because we're unaware of what we're actually eating. And we're unaware of how much we're eating and if we're actually still hungry when we finish our plate. And I like to explain this to people in the sense that, it often takes 20 minutes for our body to recognize any sort of changes in our hormone levels and our fullness levels when it comes to our eating. And the signals from our tummy to our brain, they're very weak. They're, again, they take a long time and they're very weak. But the signals from a stimulus that we might be looking at, like TV or on our device, that stimulus that goes from the TV to our brain is very powerful. It's very short and it's very strong. And that's why we can kind of zone out in front of TV or get engrossed in a show and not even realize that we have, finished our plate or finished the bowl of our snack or whatever we're having. So it's this idea that we've got these competing signals that are going on. So let's take a look at some ways that maybe we're mindless eating. So again, it often causes us to eat too quickly and typically overeat because we're unaware of what we're eating. And you might be mindlessly eating if you realize that you're constantly eating until you're overly full or sick. Maybe you find yourself grazing on food without necessarily tasting it and wondering why. You might find some empty Raptors after and going like, did I eat that? You find yourself grazing on food, again, without really tasting it, smelling it, feeling it, wondering what's going on. You didn't pay attention to the foods that you're eating, and maybe the frequency that you're eating around foods and the distractions. And maybe you're someone that rushes through meals or would define yourself as a really fast eater. Or maybe you have trouble remembering the taste or smell or the look of the meal that you've just eaten. So if any of these sound familiar to you, then you might be struggling with a little bit of mindless eating. So mindful eating, again, is eating with intention and attention. Eating with intention of caring for yourself. And eating with attention necessary for noticing and enjoying your food and how it affects your body. Mindful eating is so much more than just eating slowly without distractions. And, I see a lot of people saying, oh yeah, I just started to, eat slower and not eat with the TV on, and now I'm a mindful eater. And that's not really the case. It's part of it, absolutely, but there's a lot more going on inwardly when it comes to mindful eating. So we're bringing awareness of physical and emotional cues around eating. We're recognizing, non-hunger triggers for eating. Mindful eating, we're learning to meet our needs in a more effective way other than eating. We're being mindful of that. Mindful when there might be a trigger to eat to deal with a problem. We're choosing food for both enjoyment and nourishment. And I think a lot of times I hear people say, "Oh, I can't eat that. It's sinfully delicious," or, something along that like that. And there's really no morality when it comes to food. Like, eating chocolate doesn't make you good or bad. So, food can be used for enjoyment, and food can be used for other things than just nourishment. So, eating for optimal satisfaction and fullness as well, not just eating and stopping when you think you should. Using the fuel or the food that you've consumed to live a vibrant life that you crave. Allowing yourself to become aware of the positive and nurturing opportunities that are available through food selection and preparation of your food, and respecting your own inner wisdom. What makes you feel good, what makes you not feel good, and choosing foods appropriately through, again, what's making you feel good. So using all your senses in choosing food to eat that is both satisfying you and nourishing your body. For example, have you ever, I don't know, someone's given you either chocolate or some sort of candy, and you're halfway eating it and you're like, I don't even like this. But then you just finish it because, well, you already started. The idea is when you're bringing mindfulness into what you're eating and you pause and you're like, I don't even like this, then you just get rid of it. You don't need it. You don't want it. And you're not honoring your body when you're, eating something that you don't like. So it's, again, bringing that mindfulness in. And acknowledging responses to foods like dislikes, likes, or just neutral, without judgment. So even if you did finish that food item that you didn't really like, your emotions around it would be neutral. It was like, I really didn't need that. I wonder why I finished it. Like, next time, maybe if I don't like something, I'll just throw it away. And then becoming aware of your physical hunger and fullness cues to help you guide your decisions to begin eating and ending eating. And we can't always utilize our hunger and fullness signals depending on what's going on in life. But the idea is we want to come to the table, feeling hungry and finishing when we feel full, and letting our inner wisdom, our body, tell us when that happens. And if we're checked out, if we're not able to tune in mindfully to what's going on because we got other things on the go, or our relationship with food is really struggling, it's hard to do this. But it's a really cool experience when you're able to eat your meal and leave 2 or 3 bites on the plate and just be like, I'm done. I don't need any more. I'm full. And not let any of those other reasons to continue eating, whether it's, we're part of the Clean Your Plate Club and feel like we're, guided to cleaning our plate because of something we were taught when we were younger. But to just have this freedom to be able to stop when we're full and just stop. So this broad application makes mindful eating a powerful tool for developing healthier, happier relationship with food. So I want to talk about this mindful eating cycle as it applies to our eating. So Michelle May, MD, founder of the Mindful Eating Workshops at My Hungry, believes that awareness of food and the eating process is necessary and a component that facilitates behavior change. So many of the habits that drive overeating are unconscious behaviors that people have repeated for years, and they act them out without even realizing it. She says, so the process of mindfulness allows a person to wake up and become aware of what they're doing. And once you're aware, you can change your actions. So a visual representation of this is the mindful eating cycle that you can see right here. And it's from Michelle May's book, Eat What You Love, Love What You Eat. And I just have listened to it again. I get it on audiobooks, and it's absolutely great when explaining this relationship with food and why we eat. So since most people eat for reasons other than physical hunger, the first question that is on the cycle is, why do I eat? And it's often the central, we need to kind of understand that for ultimate behavior change. So why do I eat? And we might want to explore different things like physical hunger, or, these triggers to hunger or to eating. So physical hunger, a challenging situation, or maybe an environmental or visual cue, something that might spring from stress or fatigue or boredom. So the idea is like, why am I eating? Like, when you sit down to food, just ask yourself, why am I eating? Is it because I'm hungry? Or is it because I'm tired? Is it because I just saw it and it's there? Did somebody just bring donuts into the office? Am I tired? So these are all things to ask yourself when we're looking at mindful eating is, why am I eating? Why do I eat? Then we want to move over to, when do I want to eat? So the answer may depend on the clock, physical hunger, cues, or emotions. It might be, you might be meal hungry versus snack hungry. It might be snack hungry versus meal hungry. So then we want to ask ourselves, what do I eat? We know now when we want to eat, and then we ask ourselves, what do I want to eat? So this examines the factors that people consider when choosing food, such as convenience, taste, comfort, nutrition, how it's going to make you feel. Then we ask ourselves, how do I eat? So is eating rushed? Is it mindful? Is it distracted? Is it secretive? Are we on our technology, or, with our on-the-go society? Are we doing a whole bunch of other things at the one time? But as we ask ourselves this, it's kind of this exploration of understanding, how do I eat? Are you, again, eating in front of the TV? Are you sitting down and setting the table and maybe putting some flowers out or some candles and enjoying the experience and eating slowly? And then after that, the last piece is, where does my energy go? So eating can be invigorating, but it can also cause sluggishness or, or it leads to feelings of guilt or shame. So how is your energy used for work or play? So after you've eaten, when this food converts into energy, how am I going to use it? How does it make me feel after I've eaten? So it's a really interesting cycle to consider and take a look at. And again, just kind of one piece of mindful eating for you to take a look at. And you can look up where I got this from, which is Michelle May again. And she has a book called Eat What You Love What You Eat, in a program called Am I Hungry? So now that we kind of understand a little bit more about mindful eating, let's take a look at why we should try mindful eating. So eating is natural, it's healthy, and it's pleasurable activity for meeting our energy needs and nutrition needs. However, in our society, food is abundant, and we live in this diet-obsessed culture, and eating is often mindless, and it's consuming, and ends up being a little bit guilt-induced instead of being this pleasurable activity. So today's fast-paced society tempts people with an abundance of food choices. On top of that, distractions have shifted attention away from the actual act of eating towards things like television or computers or smartphones. And eating's actually become this mindful or mindless act, and is often done quickly and in a very short period of time. And this is what we notice as being problematic, since it really does take that 20 minutes for your brain to actually catch up and realize that you're full. So if you're eating too fast, the fullness signal may not arrive until you've already eaten too much. And this is a very common situation, and we may feel like, we've binged and we've overeaten, but we might have just eaten too fast at the time. So by eating mindfully, you're going to restore your attention and slow down and make eating an intentional act instead of an automatic one. And I just want you to think and consider, like, how much of your eating is automatic versus bringing a lot of intention and eating being an intentional act. What's more is, by increasing our recognition of physical hunger and fullness cues, you're able to distinguish between emotional and true physical hunger. So you'll also increase your awareness of triggers that make you want to eat, even maybe when you're not necessarily hungry. And that's the neat thing about mindfulness is when you stop and you ask, like, why am I eating, at that kind of first piece, it might be an emotional response, which again is okay. But if we start taking a look at that we're doing this more and more, we might realize, like, hey, I might need to find some other strategies to deal with this problem at hand. So by knowing your triggers, you can create space between them and your response, giving you the time and freedom to choose how to react. And one of the skills that I do with my clients in nutrition counseling is I try to teach them to pause before reacting. And when we're looking at food and we might just be feel an emotion or something's happened, and we immediately want to say maybe go grab a chocolate bar, and that's maybe a habit that we've done for a long time in a response to stress or a situation. But the idea is to just pause and pause before you react and build some space in there to be able to ask yourself, hey, what's going on? What's going on with why I want to do this? And it doesn't mean pause and don't do the chocolate bar, don't have that. It's just make some space to ask yourself what's going on. And as we restore attention and increase awareness, we're able to find out really what the issue is and then decide how we're going to go ahead and deal with it. So then we want to take a look at, why I should try mindful eating. So when you're able to eat mindfully, you're going to be able to reconnect with your inner wisdom about hunger and fullness, which in our society we've often been disconnected with. If you're able to go, 4 or 5 hours without eating and not be hungry, skipping meals, then we're actually disconnected from those feelings. And when we're able to be mindful about our eating, it offers the possibility of freeing yourself from reactive patterns around food and eating. That not even thinking about it, but just reaching for the food, or you're stressed out and you decide to go swing by your local drive-thru to grab something, again, without thinking about it. When you're mindful eating, it helps you nourish not only the body but the heart, because you're recognizing that food is not the answer for this, and deal with other ways of dealing with your problems other than food. It helps you become empowered to make healthier choices, and unlike dieting, which leads to feeling of deprivation, you're going to feel more satisfied. And it's going to bring awareness to your relationship with other people and beings. And sometimes it's challenging at the beginning, but I know I have a favorite friend that likes to bring over baking and then always insists that I, sit there and eat it with her. And it's like, I just had lunch. I'm not hungry. Can we wait? And, recognizing sometimes that when we're kind of being forced to eat, or these situations where eating is kind of expected, that when we're eating mindfully, we can bring awareness to that and make different decisions and kind of realize what's going on. And mindful eating also helps us shift the focus from, control away from external authorities, and it lets us have more inner body wisdom. So what I mean by that is that when we're following diet rules or diet plans or meal plans or just any sort of external authorities or guidelines, it's not listening to what our body is saying. So if you've ever been on a diet, I'm sure there's some dieting harm and dieting rules that you've learned from there. And that is all external recommendations. And how could any sort of diet plan or rule or pattern of eating really understand what your body needs? And, some days we're more active and some days we're more sedentary. So our eating patterns have to shift based on our activity level. And when we're following external authorities or recommendations or guidelines, it's usually just, a blanket recommendation and doesn't take into consideration that we have days that shift and change, and some days we need more and some days we need less. And with mindful eating, we're able to manage our eating that way. So let's meet someone who does eat mindfully. So someone who eats mindfully acknowledges that there's no right or wrong way to eat, but there's a varying degree of awareness that surrounds the food experience. Someone who eats mindfully accepts that their eating experience is unique. Someone who eats mindfully is an individual who by choice directs their attention to eating on a moment-by-moment basis. They gain awareness of how they can make choices that support health and well-being. And they become aware of the interconnection of living here on Earth, being around people, cultural practices, and the impacts of their food choices and systems. So, how does mindful eating help resolve eating issues? Well, many people who struggle with food react mindlessly to their unrecognized or unexamined triggers, their thoughts, their feelings. So, in other words, they react, and I talked about this. When we're reacting, we're repeating past actions again and again, and feeling powerless to change. And mindfulness and mindful eating increases your awareness to these patterns without judgment and creates a space between you and your triggers and your actions. So, for example, whenever you notice that you're feeling like eating and you just want to take some time and pause and ask yourself, am I hungry? Are you able to observe your thoughts? And, are you able to feel what's going on, and then you're able to choose how to respond. So instead of reacting mindlessly, mindfulness gives you the responsibility. So you now have this opportunity to say, how am I going to deal with this? What choice am I going to make? And this is how mindful eating empowers you to finally break away from automatic or habitual habits or this chain reaction and discover options that are going to work better for you. So, how do we become more aware and tuned in? And, to do this, we really want to start and look at, firstly, why we eat the way we do and understanding some of the maybe environmental triggers or emotional responses to eating is really important to take a look at first before we're able to figure out how to tune in, because there's a lot of different reasons why. So let's take a look at, again, these reasons why we eat, and there is a lot of them. So let's get into these. So when we think about all of the different reasons why we eat, you can just think of it right now before we get into it. And I love asking this in a workshop and getting people to name all the different reasons why we eat. And they could be like, oh, well, I eat because it was a birthday party, or because my colleagues, brought donuts to work, or I eat because I'm happy or sad or angry. And, the list kind of goes on. And when I ask, like, what about like basic nourishment? you know, do we eat just to be nourished? And it's like, oh yeah, of course. But we never think about that. There's always so many other reasons why we eat. So let's take a look at just some of them here. So eating is pleasurable, and food is a wonderful way to add pleasure to our lives. And for many of us, food is really a highlight of, things like holidays and special occasions. And I just want to let you know, there is nothing wrong with that. So for many folks, eating may fill a void, and especially this time of our lives, through the pandemic, planning a meal or enjoying a snack might actually help, seem to fill a void, and even if it's only temporary, it's filling these voids. When we take a look at reasons why we often eat to help manage stress in stressful situations, and stress is definitely common and normal these days. And stress eating, again, it provides temporary relief and a distraction. It's not an end all though. So we eat to also ease anxiety. So some people may feel anxious and they can't quite put their finger on it. But when we live in times where we have uncertainty or maybe loss of control and fear of the unknown, these are all very common sources of anxiety. And when again we feel anxious, we might be reaching towards food. So eating also cures boredom, and yes, boredom is an emotion. So eating for something to do is something that easily cures boredom, but again, only temporarily. Eating also tastes good, and it's a pleasurable thing to do, something to do when we're bored. So recognizing this and bringing awareness and attention can help us find other things to do when we're eating out of boredom. So food is often brought to forefront as maybe a friend, somebody that is always going to be there and is always available, and it can give you this kind of false sense of connection, as if you're, familiar friend. Food is also readily available for the most part, and if you're working from home, it's often just a few steps away, and it may seem to call you from the kitchen, like, "Hello, I'm here, come get me." And it's really easy to reach for a snack when you're feeling bored or overwhelmed or stressed or anything that's going on. So, just this food environment of being at home and having it around you is again a reason why we eat. And on the same side, food, another reason we may eat or overeat is sometimes food may seem scarce. So, if we've been used to getting certain foods that are readily available from maybe a certain restaurant or takeout place, but now because of having to limit our exposure outside, we may not be going there and might feel less available. So that when we do get a chance to have it, we might maybe overeat it or have it in a larger amount because it's scarce. And again, when something's scarce or restricted, we tend to want it more. Sometimes, if somebody's ever been on a diet or has been caught up with diet culture, it's another form of food being scarce, or scarcity is when we embark on a restrictive pattern of eating. That's our body recognizing like food is scarce. So again, the principle to that is when something is scarce, we want it more. And I always like to bring up the whole toilet paper situation in Canada here, where when COVID hit, for whatever reason, people went crazy and overbought toilet paper, and then it was scarce, and so we all just wanted it, even though we didn't necessarily need it. So, thinking about why we eat around scarcity is important, and scarcity is a common trigger for eating. So, eating again provides distraction, and perhaps you have an emotion or something that you have to deal with that you don't want to. So maybe eating might be an easier way to cope. And so, when we look at these kind of emotional triggers, they can end up piling on top of one another, and eating can actually become a distraction or an escape from feeling overwhelmed. And these are mostly emotional reasons why we eat, but there's lots of other reasons why we eat. And if we're not mindful, if we're not paying attention, if we're not tuning in to all of these reasons why we eat, we're just eating automatically and not necessarily getting the full satisfaction or the full enjoyment or pleasure that food can offer, because we're not even tuned in. So how does mindfulness, help change our habits and bring more awareness to what we're doing? So for many people, again, mindless eating is a reaction to their unrecognized or unexamined thoughts. So you might be repeatedly reacting mindlessly to your thoughts and beliefs. In other words, you react, repeating past actions again, and then feeling really powerless to change. And granted, it's not always easy to recognize when a thought is driving unwanted results, especially if you've been thinking a particular way for a long period of time. But thinking thoughts that lead to undesirable results is just a habit, and habits can be changed with mindfulness and bringing some mindfulness into our eating. So, mindfulness is awareness of what's happening in the present moment, including your thoughts. And mindfulness is helpful for rewiring your brain and changing your habits, because when you pause and notice what's happening, you're able to create that space for your thoughts and your actions. By increasing your awareness of your thoughts, you can begin to bring this awareness to these habits and break old automatic habits, or this habitual chain reaction between your triggers, thoughts and feelings, actions and results. So let's look at rewiring your brain. When we take a look at maybe some of these thoughts. So, what new thought could replace the old thought? Here we go. Once I start eating candy, I just can't stop. I've heard this lots of times from clients. What we can do is we can pause and, bring some awareness in, and then think about the thought and maybe change it and, try this new thought. In the past, due to when I used to restrict, or the diet that I did, and feeling deprived, I had trouble stopping eating when I ate candy. But now that I eat what I love, and candy doesn't have a power over me. And that has to do with the permission piece. Like when we give ourselves permission around what we eat, it doesn't seem so forbidden and it actually becomes no big deal. So each time you choose to not activate your old trigger thoughts and feeling action result sequence, you weaken these connections. So the more and more you practice that pausing and changing your thoughts, we're actually able to rewire our brain and eventually break some of these automatic thoughts, which then lead to reactions for our eating. So again, with repetition, you'll hardwire these new pathways. It's kind of like insulating your brain's wiring, and your new thoughts and responses will become your new habits. So, practicing a more mindful approach to eating can enhance your enjoyment and your meals, reduce overeating, improve good digestion, reduce anxious thoughts surrounding food, and improve your relationship with food. So, I've got some ideas that you can put into place for practicing mindful eating. And, these are just, physical things that you can try to do. And I do recommend maybe trying one a week or one a day, depending on what you have time for. But it's really interesting when you start doing this, and you don't have to do it perfectly. And I like to also ask people to think about being curious, not critical. So as you bring curiosity into when you try some of these and maybe they don't go the way you wanted to, then you can ask yourself, like, I wonder why. I tried this, but why didn't it work? And what can I do differently? So some things you can do is give priority to your meal times. So maybe try to take at least 15 minutes to sit down and enjoy your meal. I like to recommend 15 to 30 minutes. It seems to kind of be the perfect amount, but if you're busy, minimum 15 minutes to enjoy your meal, chew your food, and really be able to taste it. So try to avoid distractions while you're eating as well. So again, except for the exception of dining company or your family, it is impossible to really truly enjoy your food if your attention is elsewhere, like if you're watching TV. Or if you're driving or in front of the computer. These circumstances, again, lead to that kind of mindless eating, and you end up overeating and maybe choosing foods that you aren't getting true satisfaction from with your meals. So you want to think about, again, trying to avoid any of those distractions and give yourself the opportunity to practice this mindfulness. So again, trying to avoid being rushed around meal times, and make sure you schedule enough time to eat your meal, and that you're not going to be interrupted in this adequate amount of time. Definitely always sit down for your meal. Try to avoid standing up or eating by the counter. The idea is sit down and let your body be able to be relaxed when eating. Serve your food in a bowl or plate, and definitely try to avoid eating right from the box or the package or the container. Serve yourself your food into a bowl or a plate and sit down and eat it. So you can try to, if you really need some help kind of slowing things down, you can take a bite and then maybe put your cutlery down and then chew your food and then eat again. But one of the tips I like to also do is, like, that might feel really forced, but if you just pause before you put more food on your fork and use that time to bring some mindfulness into your meal. So the other thing you can do is, when we're looking at being mindfulness, about 50% into your meal or halfway into your meal, just kind of pause and ask yourself, how am I feeling? And is this food hitting the spot? Take time to truly savor and taste your food and use all your senses. So before you actually eat, it's nice to just take a look at your food and what does it look like? What are the colors? What does it smell like? What is its overall appeal to your meal that you're about to eat? During the meal, can you identify the different components of the food that you're tasting? What are the flavors? What can you smell? And this other piece is interesting. How does it feel in your mouth? Is it crunchy? Is it soft? Is it smooth? Ask yourself how you feel about the food and you're eating. Does it make you feel happy? Is it bringing you pleasure? Are you feeling regret or guilt or stress or disappointment? Again, bring that curiosity into what's going on and ask yourself what thoughts about the foods are coming to mind. Does it bring up any memories or fears or beliefs? Before and after your meal, you want to ask yourself, how does your body feel? Does it make me feel bloated? Does it make me feel energized or lethargic? Does it make my stomach feel kind of full or nauseous or empty? And then we can also take a look at where you're preparing your meals. So, the act of preparing your food is also very mindful. When you're preparing it, are you touching it? Are you tasting it? Are you smelling it? And then also take note of the difference between maybe fresh food and whole foods or minimally processed foods, and how it makes you feel in your overall vitality. So food is here to nourish the body and provide nutrition to, facilitate optimal functioning. And if the food that you're eating isn't leaving you feeling very good, again, bring curiosity into why you ate it, why you chose it. And when you do this and bring some of this mindfulness in, you'll definitely feel a lot better. I think one explanation that I have or example is that I'm lactose intolerant as well as I have a shellfish allergy. So both are mild and both I can tolerate a certain amount with minimal discomfort. But either way, I do get discomfort. And the issue is I really love dairy and I really love seafood. But as I started practicing mindful eating and started bringing more mindfulness into the way I eat, it kind of hit me. Like I would eat this and I would pay attention to how I'd feel. I'm like, I feel really crappy. And then you have the opportunity to figure out, what am I going to do with this knowledge that I have when I'm not paying attention and when I'm just kind of eating because I love it and not paying attention. I don't necessarily really feel how bad it feels until it's too late. But when you're starting to bring some mindfulness into this, you can recognize how foods make you feel and make a different decision. So honoring how your body feels about that and saying, oh, I think I'm going to have to find an alternative for these food items while everybody might be having them has been very, very helpful. So let's look at connecting with our hunger and fullness. So this is important too for when we're able to bring that mindfulness into our eating. So, another way of just being really, I guess, straightforward with our eating, we could do all those other tips that I mentioned, or we can just take a look at being mindful of our hunger and fullness. And you could do this by just giving your full attention to the food that's in front of you. Take a couple deep breaths and then ask yourself, like, how am I feeling? Am I hungry? Am I full? And when you're taking those deep breaths, you're bringing some mindfulness. And I think a lot of the times we just sit down and don't even think about it and start eating. So this way we're able to, if we pause, take some deep breaths, we're able to kind of force ourselves to build a habit around bringing some mindfulness in. So let's talk about the hunger fullness guide, and we use this in our practice, and it helps people understand when we're eating and bringing some mindfulness into eating, kind of the level of fullness. So we have this scale from 0 to 10, and 0 or 1 would be we're so hungry, we're maybe lightheaded and weak, and then we've got 10 where we're so full that we might be sick. And then we have all these different points in between. And the idea is that we want to spend most of our time between a 4 and a 6. So a 4 and a 6 would be subtle hunger or full, 5 neutral, not hungry or full, and 6 is satisfied. So that's where we want to spend most of our time. And then what happens is after we've eaten a meal and we're between 4 and 6, 3 to 4 hours go by and our hunger fullness scale will start to go down from a 5 to a 4 to a 3. And that's about when we want to start thinking when am I going to eat? What am I going to eat? And start getting a plan. Because if we allow ourselves to go from a 3 down to a 2, down to a 1, we're now at a point where we're very vulnerable. And that just means that we have such a strong amount of biological hunger that whatever is around might be our first go-to choice to fuel our bodies. And if it's not planned, it might not be the healthful choice that we want to choose. And we have to bring some compassion into this whole situation, because I think everybody on planet Earth has probably experienced this. But the idea is that when we're down to a 2 or a 1, we just need to eat, and those choices may not always be the ones that we wanted to make. But if we are, around a 3, we still got enough fuel in our brain to make a plan of action and eat in a way that we want to. So that's kind of going down the hunger scale. And if you've ever gotten down from a 2 to a 1, some people actually can get past the 1 to a 0, and then they're back to like not even feeling hungry or full. And this might be 4 or 5 or 6 hours after eating, and you kind of push past that hunger, and now you're not hungry again. But we might be having things like maybe grumpy mood, a headache, feeling tired or fatigued. So these are all also signals of feeling hungry, but we don't necessarily have that stomach grumbling. So we just kind of turn it off. And long-term doing this is definitely not good for your health. Then we also, on the other end of the scale, we've got moving up towards, we got 6 being satisfied, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And what happens is when we're maybe distracted eating and not paying attention to what we're eating, we may eat more than we want and maybe finish at a 7. So we're kind of full and slightly discomforted. But if we ate enough, again, we have that 20 to maybe 30 minutes for our food to kind of catch up to our brain. So as time goes by, we might have finished our meal and we're at a 6, being like, I really overate, but I'm at a 7. And if you ask yourself an hour later and tune inwardly, an hour later, you might realize that you're 8 or a 9 an hour later, or maybe even a 10. So that's where it's really important to maybe pause during your meal halfway through and assess where you might be at on the hunger fullness scale, and see if you're able to pay attention to that and guide your decisions based on how you're feeling with how much you've eaten. So again, this is a really nice scale to use, and when you're first starting out, to bring that awareness to how your appetite and your cues might be informing your body. So let's look again more so at how to practice mindful eating. So we've got some practical tips to go ahead and do. We've got some inwardly cues like listening to our hunger and fullness. But I'm going to kind of go through another way of looking at mindful eating. So for the first breath, like when you're looking at your meal, for the first breath, you want to inhale the smells. So as you inhale, what are you smelling? And then try to maybe exhale any tension or stress. So if you've got maybe a piece of chocolate here, you might inhale, smells delicious, and then exhale any sort of tension or stress that you might be feeling. For the second breath, inhale and know that feeling of hunger will pass, and exhale your worries and now smile. So it's good to remember that hunger is only temporary. So for the third breath, you want to inhale at the present moment and exhale any thoughts of tasks or projects or deadlines. So often we come to the table and we're just like, I gotta eat, and I gotta eat fast. But if we take some time to practice this and give ourselves the space to do this, we're going to feel much better. So you want to tell yourself, I can choose to relax and enjoy eating. I have the right to do this. And pause. Let your eyes feast on the food before you. Even if it's just a cracker or a few pieces of food, celebrate what you'll be eating. Now allow yourself to become aware of your feelings. Feelings can be described as a one-word emotion. For example, things like I feel worried or stressed or fearful or frustrated or resentment, anxiety. I'm feeling rushed or busy, or I don't have time to eat. And these all offer, a powerful flavor that distracts you from your bite in your mouth. So we want to bring awareness to that. Feelings can be of overwhelm and actually, our feelings can overwhelm you to the point where you aren't able to taste your food. And if this is happening, pause and take another deep breath. And try to think about, again, bringing that curiosity and not criticism into what you're doing. And really try to anticipate your meal by seeing what's enjoyable about it. So when you encourage emotions, you may be able to enjoy the flavors and these thoughts and make it more an enjoyable experience. So and then go ahead and, taste that bite directly and notice everything about the food that's in your mouth. And you can pause and ask yourself to, take some time to fully take in this experience. Is eating this bite that I've just taken, is it neutral or is it unpleasant? Ask yourself, what can I do to make things more enjoyable? And, when you eat more mindfully, you're bringing your full attention to the food that you're eating. And mindfulness opens the mind to see the opportunities and choice. And the best thing is that you're actually able to taste the flavor and find that satisfaction with your food. So sometimes, doing this practice of mindful eating, it might feel forced. It might not feel structured enough if you've done a lot of maybe diets and you're used to that and you want to break free from it, but you're not too sure how. I do recommend maybe taking a look at keeping a food and mood journal because it's a great way to connect the mind with your eating experience. So I've included a blank food and mood journal for you after this workshop that you can download. And the idea is to just take some time and you can record your hunger and fullness level on it. You can record it before you're eating, midpoint, and after. You can record things like your thoughts and emotions around your eating and how it's making you feel. You can record even your digestion, like, does this meal make me feel good? Does it make me feel bloated? Does it make me feel like I haven't gotten enough? But all of these ideas are something that you can record and keep in your food and mood journal. And sometimes just the act of writing something down will bring a mindfulness into your meals. So I hope that you enjoy that. So that is all for our workshop, the slides that I prepared for you today. I'm going to pop back on the screen here and we can go to our Q&A time now.